About 6 or 7 months ago, I began to notice a significant change in my wife, Carla, after she returned from a work trip. This annual outing, organized by her manager, was meant to help the team bond and reconnect. Normally, Carla would come back energized, eager to share stories and experiences from the trip. However, this time was different. From the moment she walked through the door, there was a noticeable shift in her attitude. She seemed distant and didn't share much about her trip, which was unusual for her. When I asked if something was wrong, she simply shook her head and dismissed my concerns. At first, I thought it was just the typical post-trip fatigue. Perhaps she was worn out from all the traveling and socializing. But as days went by, her behavior only seemed to worsen. Carla became irritable, picking fights over minor issues that wouldn't have bothered her before. Our relationship, which had always been healthy and easygoing, suddenly felt tense. It was as if she was searching for reasons to argue, and these conflicts seemed to arise out of nowhere. A light-hearted comment would now lead to frustration or, worse, a full-blown argument. I struggled to understand the source of her anger and irritation. As time went on, it wasn't just the arguments that concerned me. Carla also started to pull away from our usual routines. We had a cherished tradition of weekly dates, whether it was grabbing coffee or enjoying a leisurely walk in the park. These moments were our special time to reconnect and escape the pressures of work. Carla began canceling our dates with increasingly flimsy excuses, claiming she was too tired or had too much work, even on weekends. As the cancellations piled up, so did my concern. I missed the time we spent together, our connection, and the laughter we shared. Her mood swings became more noticeable. One moment she seemed fine, and the next, she was distant and withdrawn. Naturally, I started to worry. Was she falling out of love with me, or worse, had she found someone else? I hated to entertain such thoughts, but her behavior felt so unusual that I couldn't help but consider possibilities I never would have before. When I finally brought up my concerns, Carla insisted there was no one else, claiming I was overthinking things and that she just needed time to sort out some personal issues. I decided to give her space, hoping that whatever she was dealing with would resolve itself. I thought that if I didn't pressure her and allowed her some breathing room, she would eventually return to her old self, and we could go back to how things used to be. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The more space I gave her, the more distant she became. She started working longer hours, coming home late, sometimes even after I had gone to bed. She used to share stories about her day, funny anecdotes about her coworkers, or vent about office drama. But now there was just silence. Whenever I tried to ask her about her day, she became increasingly evasive, and her actions only fueled my doubts. With our relationship feeling unstable, I suggested we try marriage counseling, thinking that perhaps a counselor could help her open up. Carla and I had a chance to talk openly, and I thought we could figure out what was causing the distance between us. To my surprise, she declined, expressing that she preferred to see a therapist on her own first. She felt it was important to focus on herself before we could work on our relationship together. While this wasn't what I had hoped for, I agreed because I wanted her to feel supported in whatever way she needed. Shortly after, Carla found a therapist and began attending sessions 3 times a week for 2 hours each. I didn't pry too much, trusting that she had chosen someone capable of helping her. My only wish was for her to find the clarity and peace she was seeking, and for us to reconnect afterward. After each session, Carla seemed to be in a better mood, almost lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. I hoped this was a sign that things would improve between us, and that we were starting a new chapter in our relationship. However, things took a turn for the stranger. Carla began spending even more time away from home, often making plans that didn't include me. It started with a few evenings out, but soon it escalated to nearly every weekend. She would leave without much explanation and wouldn't return until late at night. I've always encouraged her to have her own life outside of our marriage, so I didn't mind her going out with friends. However, I did expect her to at least give me a heads up. Her frequent and unexpected absences, along with her lack of communication, made me feel sidelined in my own marriage. Meanwhile, Carla seemed oblivious to how much I missed spending time with her, and how I longed for the closeness we once had. What troubled me even more was when I found out, almost by accident, that she wasn't just hanging out with friends during her outings. She was also spending time with strangers she met at bars. This was something she had never mentioned to me, and I only learned about it when several of my friends brought it up. Friends reached out to me, worried because they had seen her at bars, dancing with strangers while clearly intoxicated and behaving in ways that seemed completely unlike her. They recognized her as my wife, and it was incredibly humiliating to hear about her actions from others while I was left unaware. I felt lost, grappling with the embarrassment and confusion her behavior caused. When I finally mustered the courage to discuss it, hoping for an open conversation, she brushed off my concerns, insisting she was just having fun. She argued that dancing and chatting with strangers didn't imply anything inappropriate, as if her interactions were harmless and I shouldn't be affected by this unfamiliar side of her. Then she stopped contributing to household chores. We had always shared responsibilities equally since we both started working. I took care of cooking and packing our lunches, while Carla managed the dishes and laundry. This arrangement had worked well for us, but suddenly she stopped fulfilling her part. She began to express that she felt burdened by housework, claiming that none of her friends had to juggle both jobs and home responsibilities. We had always maintained a mutual understanding of shared effort, allowing us to focus on our careers while keeping our home in order. Her sudden frustration felt very out of character, and when she voiced these complaints, I tried to empathize, but I couldn't overlook the reality of the situation. I pointed out that if she was comparing herself to her friends, in our neighborhood, many of the women were stay-at-home wives who spent their days managing their homes. I suggested to Carla that if she was feeling overwhelmed with both her job and household responsibilities, she might consider leaving her job to focus on home life full-time. I was more than willing to take on the role of the sole breadwinner. However, if she preferred to keep working, it was important for us to share the household chores. I never complained about my contributions at home, so I was puzzled as to why she was making it a point of contention. Carla insisted she didn't want to handle housework anymore, stating that her job was already too demanding, and she didn't want to come home to more work. She told me I needed to take charge of everything at home until she felt more prepared to help. Since then, I've been managing all the household tasks on my own, including cooking, cleaning, and laundry, hoping she would eventually recognize my efforts. Unfortunately, my hard work has gone unnoticed. To my surprise, I learned that 2 months ago, Carla had been telling outrageous stories about me around the neighborhood. I found out from some male friends whose wives are close to Carla, and they expressed concern over what she had been saying. Apparently, Carla described me as controlling and toxic, claiming I didn't allow her to live peacefully. When other wives asked for specifics, she told them I was too close-minded and that I restricted her from having fun, which made her feel unfulfilled in our marriage. Carla began to engage with other men as a way to rediscover parts of herself that she felt had been stifled since our marriage. She confided in her friends about having fantasies of exploring her femininity with them. At first, I found it hard to believe. This didn't seem like the Carla I knew. She had always been private about our relationship and typically avoided discussing personal matters with friends. I couldn't understand why she would speak about me in such a way, especially since I had never restricted her freedom. In fact, she had been doing as she pleased for months while I quietly supported her. Suddenly, she was accusing me of being toxic and suppressing her. Feeling the need for clarity, I confronted her about what my friends had told me. I asked if it was true that she had been discussing me in that light, wanting to understand her perspective and why she felt compelled to share those feelings. To my surprise, Carla didn't deny it. She calmly acknowledged that she had opened up to others about her dissatisfaction and uncertainty regarding our relationship, which prompted her to express her frustrations. When I pressed her for more details, Carla began to share insights from her therapy sessions. She explained how her therapist had helped her identify a lack of excitement in her life. In a strangely detached tone, she told me that she now saw me as boring and predictable, feeling that our marriage had lost its passion. Those words hit hard, especially since I had always believed she was happy with the life we had created together. I reminded her of the many times she had expressed joy and how we had worked together to maintain a balanced and fulfilling relationship over the years. Instead of empathizing with my feelings, she accused me of suffocating her by clinging to the past. Over the years, she felt that some of our memories and moments had become outdated. She insisted that while she had grown and adapted to the changing times, I had remained the same, which created a disconnect between us. My thoughts began to race, so I asked her directly what she wanted from our marriage. After a moment of hesitation, clearly anxious, she revealed that she and her therapist thought an open marriage might be the answer to our issues. I was shocked and told her plainly that I didn't believe in open marriages. Carla countered that, even if I didn't agree, she did. She argued that opening our relationship could reignite the excitement she felt was lacking, allowing her to rediscover herself while still being married to me. She added that if I wasn't comfortable with her being intimate with others, that was fine, but she wanted the freedom to do so without guilt. Her proposal left me stunned. I struggled to comprehend her words. I never thought our marriage would come to a point where she felt the need to seek fulfillment outside of it. How could meeting new people, while still being married, resolve our issues? I also questioned how her therapist could suggest such a thing. I believed she was seeing a therapist to better herself, but it seemed this therapist was merely encouraging her to entertain these absurd ideas. I told Carla that if she wanted a divorce, she didn't need to fabricate a story about excitement or a desire for something new. I suggested that if she was truly unhappy, she should be honest instead of creating justifications for an open marriage. I believed it would be better for us to part ways than to remain married while pursuing relationships with others. This wasn't the kind of marriage I envisioned, and I couldn't accept it. To my surprise, Carla resisted, saying she genuinely enjoyed being married to me. She highlighted how much she valued me as a dependable partner and how I provided a stable foundation for her. She expressed appreciation for our time together, yet simultaneously claimed that the spark between us had faded. She suggested that we could remain married while exploring relationships with other people, arguing that this new arrangement could add excitement to our marriage. I told her I needed time to consider it, as this was a significant decision. During the following days of reflection, I came to the realization that an open marriage wasn't what I wanted, and more importantly, I didn't recognize the person Carla had become. She had changed so much that I felt a disconnect. Her clothing was now more revealing, and she was constantly glued to her phone, engaged in conversations with others. It seemed like she had adopted a completely different lifestyle that no longer aligned with the values we once shared. Our interactions had dwindled, and she had neglected her responsibilities at home, treating me more like a roommate than a partner. I slowly understood that I didn't want this new version of my wife. I didn't want a partner who felt the need to seek fulfillment outside our marriage. After months of trying to be supportive and patient, I realized that the Carla I loved was gone, replaced by someone who viewed our relationship as a convenience rather than a commitment. It was painful, but I recognized it might be time to let go of our marriage. I had done everything I could, but it clearly wasn't enough. After 2 weeks of careful consideration, I sat Carla down and told her I wanted a divorce. I explained my reasons and asked her not to contest my decision. However, Carla quickly became angry, accusing me of being overly sensitive and insisting that my desire for a divorce was an extreme reaction. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't just adapt to this new way of life. She suggested that I remain calm, while I explained to her that this was not what I wanted, and that she couldn't just impose her wishes on me. Each point I made seemed to only fuel her anger. Carla then flipped the situation, accusing me of lacking the desire to work on our marriage and claiming I was the real issue. I wasn't surprised by her reaction. She had a history of gaslighting me and shifting blame without taking any responsibility. I attempted to reason with her, but she refused to relent. Realizing we were at an impasse, I asked her to leave. Since this was my home, I felt justified in telling her to pack her things and move out. Carla shouted that I had no right to ask her to go and even threatened to ruin my life if I proceeded with the divorce. Her hostility only strengthened my resolve, and I calmly warned her not to escalate things further. In the end, she had no choice but to comply, though she left in a fit of rage, throwing things around the house and even scratching my car. Thankfully, I documented everything with photos of the damage and records of her outbursts, knowing I might need it later. It was a sad and painful conclusion to what had once been a meaningful relationship. Since moving out, Carla has been sending me insults about my masculinity and spreading rumors, telling anyone who will listen that I unfairly kicked her out and calling me a coward for not fighting for our marriage. Update. Thank you to everyone for your supportive comments. I've come to realize that my wife may have been involved in an affair, or possibly multiple affairs during our marriage, which explains her audacity in suggesting an open marriage. It seems she wants the benefits of being married to someone established like me while pursuing her own interests. Carla and I had been struggling in our relationship, and I can't pinpoint exactly why. Perhaps she never really loved me, or maybe her feelings faded over time. At this point, it hardly matters. I'm exhausted from her constant voicemails where she blames me for everything. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. For the past week, Carla has been persistently reaching out, asking to meet. I finally agreed to see her today, hoping she might be ready for an honest conversation and willing to take some responsibility for our issues. However, as soon as we sat down, she launched into a new story, claiming her therapist said I was abandoning our marriage just because things got tough. According to her therapist, I was failing my commitment by not meeting her demands. Carla then stated she would consider taking me back if I agreed to certain conditions. I was taken aback. What did she mean by taking me back? I was the one who had asked for a divorce. Out of curiosity, I asked what her conditions were. She insisted on an open marriage and wanted to quit her job to live a stress-free life without work worries. I couldn't help but laugh. I thought she was joking. How could she possibly think I would entertain such outrageous demands after everything that had transpired? Her lack of self-awareness was astonishing. I told her I would never agree to those ridiculous terms because I was completely done with our marriage. I also revealed that I had already consulted a lawyer and was in the process of filing for divorce. At that moment, her expression changed to one of shock, and her tone shifted dramatically. As her anger shifted to desperation, she asked if I was really leaving her. I nodded, feeling that there was nothing left in our marriage for me, and I was finally ready to stop trying to make it work with someone who seemed so detached from reality and unwilling to compromise. Suddenly, Carla broke down in tears, and her crying took me by surprise. It was the last thing I expected. I gently urged her to calm down and asked why she was reacting this way. Was she truly that heartbroken over my decision when she should have seen it coming? Watching her cry made me question if there was something deeper at play. I encouraged her to be honest and share if there was more behind her unusual behavior in recent months. That's when Carla finally opened up and revealed the truth. She explained that about a year ago, she had reconnected with an old high school friend named Elle at their reunion. Elle, who fancied himself a relationship guru on social media, had started to influence Carla significantly. She admitted that they began spending more time together, rekindling their friendship through long conversations and regular meetups. It was Elle who first pointed out that Carla seemed unhappy in our marriage and began questioning her about me and our relationship. As Carla shared more about our life together, Elle often criticized our marriage, portraying it as stifling and restrictive. Elle reminded Carla of her fun and adventurous past in high school, where she had multiple boyfriends, suggesting that she should still be that way. According to Elle, Carla had become boring, which led her to resent me, as she blamed me for her change in behavior. She felt she had lost herself in the marriage and, rather than taking responsibility for her choices, she projected that frustration onto me. Over time, resentment began to build up between us, and she started to emotionally distance herself, believing I was the reason she wasn't living the life she had envisioned. Elle also managed to persuade Carla that the only way to reconnect with her true self was to let go of her inhibitions, be more carefree around strangers, and just enjoy life. When Carla's work trip came up 7 months ago, Elle encouraged her to take the chance to unwind and flirt with her male colleagues since she would be away from home and me. After returning from the trip, Carla confessed that she had kissed someone but didn't share his name. She felt guilty about it, but was too scared to tell me the truth. Meanwhile, Elle was excited for her and pushed her to explore outside our marriage. Carla admitted that going out to clubs and receiving attention from men made her feel seen and validated, which thrilled her, and she began to chase that feeling. Deep down, she knew her actions were wrong, but she couldn't help herself. When I finally suggested counseling, she feared that she might confess everything to me, which could lead to our separation. Instead, she opted for therapy, which turned out to be just meetings with Elle where they would gossip and vent. Carla trusted Elle completely, believing she understood her better than anyone else. Over time, Elle's influence grew so strong that Carla started to internalize the idea that she deserved freedom and excitement, regardless of the consequences. Whenever I reached out to express my concerns, Elle would convince Carla that I was being controlling and toxic, holding her back from her true self. In fact, it was because of Elle that Carla had even approached me about the idea of an open marriage, expecting that I would simply agree to her wishes. To her surprise, I stood my ground and ended up asking her to leave. During our conversation, she revealed that she had wanted to tell me the truth afterward, but Elle had persuaded her to keep control of the situation, making me chase after her instead. For this lunch, Elle had strongly advised Carla against apologizing, insisting that she should demand what she wanted from me. However, her advice backfired, and I found myself more determined than ever to pursue a divorce. This led Carla to finally reveal everything. She pleaded with me not to leave her, admitting that she had temporarily lost her mind and that Elle's influence had clouded her judgment. She explained that because her friend was seen as a relationship expert, she had trusted her guidance, but it was evident that it had only made things worse. Now that she had come clean, Carla expressed her willingness to seek genuine therapy and even suggested we attend marriage counseling together. I could see her desperation for one last chance to mend our relationship, promising to do whatever it took to make things right. However, I was not convinced. Elle had certainly influenced my wife, but she was not the only issue. Carla had also played a part in this situation. She had made her own choices knowingly for months. She could have addressed her feelings openly like adults, but instead, she chose to bottle everything up and let Elle's toxic advice guide her. She had manipulated me, gaslighted me, and dismissed my feelings while pretending that everything was fine. Additionally, she had cheated on me, and now, when it was too late, she only confessed out of desperation. I told her firmly that despite her confession, I couldn't stay with her. While I felt some sympathy for her situation, I knew I couldn't continue in this relationship. She had transformed into someone I barely recognized, and the pain, deceit, and betrayal she brought into my life couldn't simply be forgotten. It was evident that she required professional guidance to navigate through her struggles. I offered to help her find a therapist who could assist her in addressing her issues, but that was the extent of my willingness to support her. After our meeting, as I walked away, she appeared genuinely remorseful, almost as if she wanted to apologize, but I had moved past caring. Update 3. You won't believe what I discovered. I couldn't get a wink of sleep last night after my conversation with Carla. I felt compelled to dig into Elle's social media to learn more about her. My wife had been hiding her friendship with this old acquaintance from me for months, so I was eager to uncover the truth. I admit I may have gone a bit overboard in my investigation and found out that Elle and I had a mutual friend. This guy attended the same college as her, so I reached out to him for information. He told me that Elle is known for being a homewrecker, having had numerous affairs with married men throughout her college years and career. Elle always dreamed of marrying a wealthy man young so she wouldn't have to work. After college, she did marry a rich older man, but she continued her affairs. When her husband discovered her infidelity, he left her, but she seemed unfazed, focusing instead on securing alimony during the divorce. Following that, she launched her social media presence, branding herself as a relationship guru. Given her background, it's clear she's a negative influence, and I'm no longer surprised that she gave Carla such terrible advice that ultimately harmed our marriage. Update 4. It's been a month since my last update, and for those who are curious, I had a more in-depth discussion with Carla about Elle's past. It turns out my ex was completely unaware of Elle's history of affairs and was taken aback by the revelations. Her so-called friend had kept all of this from her. To be honest, I hold Carla more accountable than Elle. It seemed like Carla was just looking for a reason to act out during our marriage, and perhaps Elle simply showed her how. Carla confessed to feeling utterly humiliated upon realizing that her friend had deceived and manipulated her for months. I reassured her that it was no longer important and suggested she be more cautious about taking advice from others in the future. Since she had opened up to me about everything, my main desire was to get a divorce so I could finally move forward. In the end, Carla agreed to the divorce, and according to our lawyers, the process should be fairly straightforward since we don't have any shared assets or children.